In the last two videos, we had a really detailed look at how we can use the multi-out options from within Regroover Pro to get further control of our discrete channels, our discrete streams, whether those are layers or the samples that we're triggering from the expansion pads over here. We also had a look at all the different export options that we have in terms of how we can get our audio or how we can get the audio from within this virtual instrument exported. In this video, what I wanted to do is have a quick look at the settings over here. So first of all, actually, let's start off with the project. This is pretty self-explanatory. We can load a new project, load a clip, load a project, and save project as if we wanted to make a different version of something. We've already taken a detailed look at all these export options. We've already taken a detailed look at the master effects section over here. Let's hop into the settings. Now, the settings over here can be useful if you want to change the default behavior of the way that Regroover Pro works. So for example, let's go ahead and let's start off with our layers mode over here. So we have three different modes. We have our trigger, we have toggle, and we have hold. Now, these are pretty standard functions that we have in terms of different behaviors. So I'm not going to really get too deep into this other than to tell you that you can activate these. But let's have a quick look at something over here in terms of, let's look at our expansion kit mode. So I've got trigger, toggle, and hold. So for example, right now it's set to trigger, and this is going to simply trigger a one-shot. So let me go ahead, let's just click OK, and let's actually open up our editor for a moment. Let's click this, and before I do that, let's go ahead and unsolo this. Okay, so you can see what happens here. When I press play, we trigger this sample. Let's go ahead into our settings, and now let's set this to toggle. We'll go ahead and click OK. You can see what's happening now. It's just repeatedly. So you can see what's happening there with that behavior. And then we can set to hold. We'll go ahead and click OK. So what this is basically meaning is that I have to hold this. If I click really quickly, but if I hold it, I get a repeat. So depending on what type of samples you are, depending on whether they have any bearing or they're locked to a grid, you might want to trigger some different behaviors with these samples. So these settings are the place to do that. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to trigger because for me and the expansion kit mode, that makes the most sense. I like to use the functions and the tools within my envelope over here to get this sounding as good as I can. And then I simply want to trigger it as a one-shot. Let's go back into settings for a moment and we'll talk about default save path and default library path. So when I'm saving anything over here, I can choose a default path to have this saved to. Now, if I wanted to change this default save path, and if I wanted to change the default library path, I could go ahead and do that just by clicking this edit tab. Then I could scroll to somewhere completely different. So perhaps it's in my documents, perhaps it's in my downloads, in my songs, essentially anywhere that I want to change this default behavior. So this is a useful function in terms of when you're wanting to adjust and change some things like the MIDI mode of both the layers and the expansion kits, and also the default save paths and the default library paths for any Regroover Pro projects that you're working with. And of course, we can also reset our notifications here as well. We'll go ahead and click OK. And I'm just going to say that I'm happy with the way that everything is right now. And I also like to choose manual locations for my projects when I'm archiving things or exporting or backing things up. So that pretty much covers everything you'd ever need to know in terms of working with Regroover Pro in your projects. So I know a lot of this has been me talking, we're clicking through different menu options, we're going through some examples, and we're talking about the technicality of this particular virtual instrument. So just to do kind of a final recap, what I'm going to do is in the next video, we're going to be taking a look at using this in use. So I've just put together a really simple little cue, and we'll take a look at how we can use some of these functions or some of these features that we've talked about and kind of just bring it all together. And we're going to do a Regroover Pro in use video. So instead of hearing me talk about everything as I'm doing it, I'm just going to go ahead and use this plugin the way that I would. Anything that I'm doing is stuff that we've already spoken about, but I'm not going to necessarily be talking and going through every single step because this is really just about putting this in use in an organic way. And we'll catch you in the next video.